Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we will be discussing about the poem A Legend of the Northland by Phoebe Cary, which is a part of class 9 CBSE syllabus, in which we will study in details about the poetess, the theme, the message, the central idea, the stanza-wise summary of the poem and the poetic devices used. For your convenience, I have added timestamps in the description so that if you wish to watch any segment again, you can just click on that particular timestamp to go through it. So, without further delay, let's get started. Let us begin by knowing a little bit about the poetess. Phoebe Cary was an American poetess. She held political and religious views that were liberal and reformed. She was a champion of women's rights. Her poetry was very different in style, very buoyant in tone, and independent in manner. The theme of the poem? The poem, The Legend of the Northland by Phoebe Cary, is based on the theme that greed is a great sin. Greedy people do not deserve the blessings and the comforts of human life. Human beings should thus acquire the quality of kindness, fellow feeling, and empathy. The poem conveys the message that as human beings, we should have positive qualities like love, fellow feeling, sympathy, and a sense of sharing. The poetess also brings forth the idea that people with negative inhuman values like selfishness, greed, and cruelty are ultimately punished. The central idea of the poem. The poem beautifully highlights the truth that greed and selfishness can result in serious complications. People who are greedy not only worsen others' problems and sufferings but also attract untold misery for themselves. The poem is in the form of a ballad. A ballad is a song narrating a story or tale in short stanzas. This, in particular, is a tale of an old lady who angers Saint Peter because of her greed to such an extent that in the end she is severely punished by him and has to lead a life of misery. Let us now move on to the stanza-wise summary of the poem. Stanza 1. Away, away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few, and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through. In Northland, the daytime is short in comparison to wintry nights, as the sun's rays reach the poles for a very short time. The nights of Northland are so chilling that it is very difficult for the people to sleep at night. The word they refer to the people living in this region. Stanza 2. Where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows, and the children look like bears' cubs in their funny furry clothes. The poetess describes the inhabitants of this place. They harness the reindeer to the sledges when it snows. The children of Northland wear clothes made basically of fur. Wearing these clothes, they appear as bear cubs. Such images give us a cold and chilling sensation. Stanza 3. They tell them a curious story. I don't believe it's true, and yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. The poetess refers to a curious story which is very popular in Northland, though the poetess is not very sure of its truthfulness. Yet, she wants to reiterate the story for the moral lesson in it. Excluding the fictional elements, the legend has a strong moral to impart to the society. Stanza 4. Once when the good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it preaching, just as he did, Once there was a saint by the name of Saint Peter. He used to live in the world and walked around it, giving religious speeches to people, just like other saints do. Then an incident took place. Stanza 5. He came to the door of a cottage, in travelling round the earth, where a little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. While travelling around the world, giving religious lectures to the people, St. Peter came to the door of an old cottage. In the cottage, he saw an old woman baking cakes in the fireplace. Stanza 6. And being faint with fasting, for the day was almost done, he asked her for her store of cakes to give him a single one. As Saint Peter had not eaten anything the entire day, he was very hungry and was feeling very weak. So he went to this woman who was baking cakes and he asked for one cake out of the many cakes that she had baked. Stanza 7. So she made a very little cake, but as it baking lay, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. The woman was very selfish. She did not give any cakes from her store to St. Peter. Instead, she started making a very small cake for him. She did not want to share her things. But when she put the cake for baking, she looked at it and thought this cake was too big to be given to someone. Stanza 8. Therefore, she needed another and still a smaller one, but it looked when she turned it over as large as the first had done. The little miser woman thought that the cake was too big to be given away. So she started making another cake, even smaller in size. When she looked at that cake, she again felt that it was as big as the previous one. Again, she was not willing to give this even smaller cake to Saint Peter. Stanza 9. Then she took a tiny scrap of dough and rolled it flat and baked it thin as a wafer, but she couldn't part with that. The third time, she took a very small amount of dough and rolled it. The poetess says that she rolled and rolled to lay emphasis on the fact that she rolled the dough and made it thin like a wafer and baked it. But she was so greedy that she couldn't give that thin piece of bread also to the saint. Stanza 10. For she said, my cakes that seem too small, when I eat of them myself, are yet too large to give away. So she put them on the shelf. The woman reasoned that when she ate the cakes, she felt that they were very small. But if she had to give them to someone, she felt that they were too big to be given away. She put all the cakes on the shelf of her kitchen and did not give anything to Saint Peter. Stanza 11. Then good Saint Peter grew angry, for he was hungry and faint, and surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint. Saint Peter grew very angry. He was very hungry and was feeling very weak, and the selfish woman was not ready to give him even a small cake. This behavior of the greedy woman angered the saint. Stanza 12. And he said, you are far too selfish to dwell in a human form, to have both food and shelter and fire to keep you warm. Saint Peter cursed the woman and said that she was very selfish. She did not deserve to live like a human being. He added that God had given her food, shelter, fire to keep warm, but she had become selfish for all the resources she had. She did not want to share them with anybody. Stanza 13. Now you shall build as the birds do, and shall get your scanty food by boring and boring and boring all day in the hard, dry wood. Saint Peter cursed the woman that henceforth she would become a bird because she did not deserve the human form. Just like birds build their houses by boring into the wood and collect very little food by working hard the entire day, similarly, she would also have to work hard in the dry wood all day and get little food and build a small place for herself to live in. Stanza 14. Then up she went through the chimney, never speaking a word, and out of the top flew a woodpecker, for she was changed to a bird. As soon as Saint Peter cursed the woman, she did not get a chance to speak for herself, because that very moment she flew up to the roof through the chimney and flew out in the form of a woodpecker. Saint Peter's curse had converted the woman into a bird. Stanza 15. She had a scarlet cap on her head, and that was left the same, but all the rest of her clothes were burnt black as a coal in the flame. When the woman turned into a bird, at that time she was wearing a red-colored cap on her head. This cap was there on the bird's head also, but the woman's remaining clothes had burned and turned black in color just like coal. The concluding stanza, stanza 16. And every country schoolboy has seen her in the wood, where she lives in the trees till this very day, boring and boring for food. People who live in the countryside, even the children who go to school, have seen this bird in the woods. She stays there the whole day and keeps digging the wood with her beak to collect her food. Whenever any child sees this bird, the elders tell them that the bird used to be a woman earlier. She was very greedy, and so she was cursed by Saint Peter and turned into a bird, thus imparting the moral that we should never be greedy. Moving on to the poetic devices used in this poem. The rhyme scheme of this poem is A, B, C, B. The second poetic device is alliteration, which is the repetition of a consonant sound in two or more close words. Example, funny and furry, learn and lesson, yet and you, tell and tale, woman, was, built, birds, and many more. The third one is repetition, which is any word or sentence that is repeated to lay emphasis on it. Example, away, which is repeated in stanza 1, rolled, which is repeated in stanza 9, and boring, which is repeated in stanza 13 as well as 16. The fourth poetic device is enjambment, which is running lines of poetry from one to the next without any use of punctuation to indicate a stop. Example, lines 3 and 4 in stanza 1, lines 3 and 4 again in stanza 3, lines 1, 2 and 3 in stanza 10, and lines 1 and 2 in stanza 11. The last poetic device used is simile, which is a comparison between two objects using as or like. Example, children look like bear cubs in stanza 2, baked it thin as a wafer in stanza 9, clothes were burned black as coal in stanza 15. With this, we come to the end of this video. Children, some of you have requested for notes and questions and answers related to the chapters and poems that I explain in my channel. You'll be glad to know that my online English coaching classes are going on, and anyone who wishes to get detailed notes of the chapters and the poems is always welcome to join. The details of my online classes are given in the description. Thanks for watching.